recent years, global protests have become increasingly prevalent as people across diverse societies express dissatisfaction with their government and societal structures. From the Arab Spring to the recent protests in various democracies, the act of protesting has emerged as a powerful form of political expression. However, the effectiveness and implications of such protests are complex and multifaceted. In many cases, protesters seek to address deep-seated issues such as economic inequality, political corruption, and social injustice. Governments, on the other hand, often respond with accusations of insurrection or attempts to overthrow the state, leading to heightened tensions and, at times, violence. Opposition parties and groups frequently play a crucial role in mobilizing and supporting protests, but their involvement can also lead to accusations of manipulation or hidden agendas. In an era where protests have become a common and potent form of political activism, understanding the motivations behind them and their real-world impact is crucial. Professor Anthony Kila, Director of the Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies, joins us now to provide a comprehensive understanding of the dynamics at play in contemporary protest and their broader implications for society and governance. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday, Professor.
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, good afternoon, Professor. Thank you for joining us on Newsday.
You can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you very clearly.
Good afternoon. Good to be here. Yes, good to be here.
So I'm wondering, how well do protests work, especially in Nigeria, in building the Nigeria of our dreams?
Well, I mean, you give it the Nigerian slant. I think a good place to start is to say protest is as old as the modern state itself, and that it's a natural, legitimate, but unfortunate occurrence in the history of humanity. It is important to factor in those elements of protest as natural, legitimate, but unfortunate. It is natural because where people are not happy, the recourse is to protest. To protest is to say, I say no to what is going on. So that's a natural thing. It's a legitimate thing because one of the key factors of democracy is actually protest, rebellion, and desire to change the way things are going, and indeed those who are in government. It is unfortunate because protest leads to disruptions of plan, and it risks turning into violence. Protests do work sometimes, let's be very careful, not all times, because the idea of protest is to call attention of the government and the people where is protest against government, because it could be protest against corporation as well. It could be students protesting against the school management. The idea is to call those in charge of any affairs attention to a particular issue or some set of issues, and to show that majority of the people are with protesters. As we've seen from Nigeria to elsewhere, sometimes, those who have been protested again, in this case government, can look at the issues raised and say, let us find a way to accommodate your stances, either fully or partially. So to that extent, I think it would be wrong to say protests are totally useless. They're disturbing, but they're not totally useless. The burden of true leadership is to avoid protest, not by propaganda, not by blackmail, not by spewing what is not true, but by meeting those demands before it turns to escalation.
So how do we gauge the success of these protests that have happened? And do you recommend maybe alternative solutions to get the message across in a more modern and effective way, other than protesting and coming out on the streets, which often leads to destruction of property and destruction of some lives?
Well, I certainly propose alternative method of to protest. I think protest should be like the nuclear button. That should be the last thing that will be pressed. But to live in a society where protest is the last option, you need some elements in place. You need a listening government. You need a channel of representation and protesting without taking to the street. When the Labour were protesting for the minimum wage, I had cause to point out on this same platform that it's a shame that for you to get heard in this country, you have to protest. We have to look at it that each time there's a protest, there's a failure of the system. That's the way we need to look at it. Ideally, when people, so we run a presidential system of government that has a parliamentarian arm of government and has the media. Ideally, when people are not happy with any policy of government, what should be done is that people should contact their representatives, i.e. parliamentarians, to say, we're not pleased with this is what we think should be done, or this is what we think not should be done. And those parliamentarians should table that and indeed reach out to government. We have parliament, we have party, and we have other organized bodies that should be the intermediate bodies liaising with government if we do not want protest. Unfortunately, it must be said, very sadly, these bodies are not vibrant. The parliament is not acting as an independent body, not that checkmate or fight government, but at least represents people. I'll tell you one feature, and this goes beyond protest. For example, in the Nigerian parliament, be it the House of Representatives or the Senate, there's something absent that worries me. The idea that when people talk, when our parliamentarians talk, when they vote, they do not act as if they represent diverse parts of Nigeria. They act mainly as if they're part of one party or another party, and worse still, as if they are for the president or against the president. Ideally, they should be acting in a way that votes and their positions should reflect diversity. So the representative from Lagos or the senator from Lagos that is an urban area should have interest that is different from somebody coming from a rural area, because the landscape are different, interests and aspirations are different. That is what will allow people not to protest, because people are speaking to them, but speaking on their behalf. Another very crucial thing that is missing is the opposition. In this moment in Nigeria, this historical moment, the opposition is divided, divisive, and moribund. It's not there. There's no gravitas. You can't really feel them. And when those who are charged and paid and recognized to oppose are not opposing, it opens a vacuum that those who are not charged and paid to do so, but feel the pain, are forced to take up things by themselves. And that is what I'm saying now. And
Professor,
yes.
Please allow me to interrupt you. You talked about
Yes,
the opposition not being vibrant.
Please do.
But in most cases, the opposition is
Yes.
usually blamed, for instigating the protest. So I'm wondering, what role really does the opposition play? And why does the government have the impression that Nigerians cannot think for themselves or express their frustrations without being manipulated?
Well, I think the idea of saying people are manipulated is a lazy way of thinking. I don't even want to say it's indolence. I don't even want to say that, it's wrong. I rather bluntly call it an indolent way of thinking, because this idea that people are being manipulated. Is anybody manipulating people to say there is sun or there is no sun? If you do the roads, if there's light, if the cost of food is at one price, you don't need to be manipulated to say it's good or bad. That is just, it's not even politics, it's indolent kind of politics, it's a lazy way of thinking. But it is legitimate to think so, because really, opposition can hide behind general public to express their opinion. Let us say it has been done in the past, including by those in government today. So, we have to be factual about it. But the truth is, every time opposition hides behind the civil society to make its point, it's a failure of leadership. That means they're leading from behind rather than leading from the front. If government or those in power says opposition are the one behind protest, opposition should feel ashamed of themselves. Because if they were doing their job, they would not need to hide behind people. They would come out and say, we are the one doing this.
Very well said.
If you notice, each time opposition...
Very well
Yes.
said. And just one more question before we leave you. Most times the government sees protests as an attempt to topple the government. How true is this, especially since the country has so many things that are not exactly as they seem to be? Why does the government expect docility even in the face of hardships and clear injustice?
Let me answer you like a citizen, a student, and a teacher of politics, and say to you that the government always feels that people want to take their position. But if saying it is opposition manipulating protest is indolent, saying protest is about seizing government is self-centeredness. It means the only thing they're thinking about is their own survival. And let me add immediately, let us not get carried away, by some wishful thinking. It is legitimate to want to change government. It is legitimate to say president must go. In this case, Tinubu must go. It is legitimate. What is not legitimate is to do it through violent means or any legitimate means, any legal means. If you want to change the president, let them gather themselves together into a group, register a party, or join an existing party, present an alternative manifesto, and win votes. But it is legitimate to aspire to change any president, because if it is not legitimate, if people did not aspire to change Jonathan, we will not have Buhari. So let us really be honest with ourselves if we want to say things. Let us not say, oh, they're trying to unseat government, so therefore it's a crime. No, it is not a crime to aspire to unseat a government of the day. What is a crime is to try to do it through illegal means.
Thank you so much.
And the conversation of saying they're doing it to unseat government
Kila
is indolent and self-centered.
Professor Anthony Kila, it's been a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining us on New State.